Welcome to What's in a Game, the podcast where Will and I have to commiserate about the end of the Nuggets season. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm doing okay considering the circumstances because it's been a couple days. But the night after, I was definitely in physical pain, emotional pain. But yeah, it is what it is. I really didn't want to lose to the Wolves because of all the narratives that were going to come out of it, but we're just going to take them one by one as they come and just live with it, I guess. How
Yeah,
are you?
narrative schmarative, right?
Yeah.
She said, hosting a literary themed podcast. I'm okay today. I've actually just not been feeling well the last couple of days, but the actual day of, I think I felt the way that I thought I would at any point if the Nuggets didn't win the title, which is like my coping mechanism involves a heavy dose of avoidance personally. So there was a lot of like within an hour, let's say an hour and a half of the game, I think I watched one post game show, which was the I watched the DNVR Losers Lounge because it's actually like
Yeah.
a little bit cathartic. It usually helps just kind of process everything that went on, and I think Adam Mares and the guys over there do a really good job with that. And then afterward, I like signed off of Twitter and immediately jumped into just watching reality TV shows, whatever non-basketball content I could just to like start to decompress. But what about you?
I definitely watch the Losers Lounge as I like to do for most losses. So shout out to DMVR guys if any of them listen to this show. I love doing that because yeah, it's so cathartic, and I need that sometimes. I tried to watch Locked On with Matt Moore, but he started with like credit to the Wolves. Like he was
Yeah.
making this point about giving the credit to the Wolves, which is so cool of him. Like everyone should be doing that. When a team wins, they definitely deserve credit. But I wasn't prepared to handle that because I was just like, I don't want to hear Wolves praise right now. But yeah, I mean, they definitely
Yeah,
deserve to
trash
win.
my team, damn it.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yeah,
wanted.
that's what I want to. Yeah, that's all I want. But yeah, eventually I got around to like listening to many more shows about the playoffs. Like Hardwood Knocks talked about off-season stuff with the Nuggets, and so did Zach Lowe. So I wanted to see what they had to say. So that was fun. But yeah, I'm feeling good, and like I'm getting back into being excited to see like what moves we make in draft coming up, and I'm interested even to see who wins these conference finals. And I don't like a ton of the teams, but we can talk about like who we're going to be rooting for and what picks they're going to be making later on. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I haven't watched too many of the shows that have done off-season breakdowns yet for the Nuggets, but I think you and I had this I think it was you and I that had this conversation on Twitter a few days ago. That was, I think it was before the game. That was kind of like, well, okay, the general manager Calvin Booth and the I guess he's like the governor of the team. I don't know, co-owner Josh Kroenke, whatever. I don't know his exact relationship to the financials of the Nuggets. They started off the season in preseason saying like, hey, like if we won a title this year, really be kind of stealing it because we're treating this almost as a gap year with their lack of like aggressive moves for improving the team. It was about a lot of internal development of our young players mostly, and if they can contribute, then that's great. And I said something to the effect of like, okay, you guys got your gap year now. So now there's going to be more pressure on years moving forward. It was kind of in response to a question about like how much pressure is there to win a title this year or make the finals this year. And I'm like very low because they set this expectation in the
Mhm.
preseason that it was not. And obviously, us as fans want to see the team go as far as possible, win as many titles as possible, right? It's all about expanding the title window of the team, and in particular of this core with Jokic, who is the best player in the world, and you don't want to like waste that, but they have also taken the view of not wanting to sort of burned through like assets and capital too early to the point where, we look like the Clippers or the Suns that are in less flexible situations in order to improve as teams after a very short time period. So it's going to be an interesting set of questions that are going to come up with this offseason, as you said, with the draft, with free agency, with trades, potential trades. And we're going to get to talk about all of that good stuff after the finals. But we're going to be focusing on basketball being played on the court for now. Did you have any specific things on either side? I know you said you didn't want to listen to Wolves praise immediately after the game, but were there specific things, whether it was what the Wolves did well, what the Nuggets didn't do well, that you wanted to talk about with respect to Game 7?
Just like basketball wise, I mean, yeah. Well, I think like a lot of what people were saying about the Nuggets' energy was spot on, where we had to play insane defense. Our rotations were crazy. In the first half, we were flying around. Um, I really loved what we were doing. So obviously, we got that 20-point lead, or around that 20-point lead going into halftime. And then the second half, I
It
guess,
was
yeah,
15, and then they
yeah. And then
extended
we
it out to
extended
20 in
it.
the middle of the third quarter.
I was really happy, and then being up 20, I can't lie. I thought we have it. Like we're gonna win this game. We're going to the conference finals. But then, the third quarter was a complete disaster. We started missing threes. They started hitting their open shots. Mike Conley was doing well hitting shots. MPJ was missing everything. Jokic was forcing it because we just were completely stagnant, and we just couldn't get it done. And I started to realize we were going to lose, seeing that third quarter run and the lead just vanish. It just seemed like they had all the momentum. The Wolves just have more bodies to just continue. And so you have players like Naz Reid flying in and dunking it on a putback, whereas we were trying to find anyone outside of Jokic and Jamal to whereas Jamal had a really great first half, and then the second half was falling off, just looking for anyone to provide something, some kind of scoring spark, and we just couldn't. So
No, I think I agree with all of that. The energy definitely was different in the second half, especially on offense. Like we were a bit less aggressive attacking the paint. I think Yoke was settling for a lot of threes, and that's just like bad game management, frankly, in my book. It's something that I knock Luka for a lot when people make the comp between him and Jokic. I think knowing the difference between, whatever shot you like want to take versus like the game requires a certain thing to happen right now, and momentum had fully shifted in favor of the Wolves as they were going on this massive run in the third quarter. Yeah, they were walling off the paint, but you just have to be more aggressive in that situation, because even if it wasn't just about the fact that he was taking the threes, they were like generated without the ball ever touching the paint too. And it's like Jokic threes, and it's like MPJ couldn't generate separation to like get an open shot yet again. I thought he was really great in the first half of this game on defense and on the boards. He had like 7 rebounds in the first quarter. It was crazy. The offensive limitations that had been there for most of the series were there the entire game, and he slowed down on his impact on defense and on the boards. So it was just a really tough second half. It was nice to see Jamal sort of come back into form in that first half. I think one of the things I have to give the Wolves credit for this is that they really tightened up on defense, every single one of them in that second half, particularly in that third quarter. One of the things that happened is that I think Minnesota realized that Jamal was basically torching Nikhil and Jaden in pick and roll in every situation, and so they put Ant back on him just to like have a more physical defender on him. And Ant is really I think not the best screen navigator, particularly off the ball, but he was fully locked in that third quarter, in that second half. And it was really hard for, like, he was going under, I think, on a lot of Jamal's screens, but like meeting Jamal where Jamal was trying to attack downhill. And I think that stymied a lot of what the Nuggets were trying to do, both when it was Jamal running pick and roll with Jokic and with AG, which is what we were using to generate a lot of our easy stuff in the first half. And then in the second half, it was just like there was just nothing there. So I actually blamed the offense in the second half more than the defense, although that fell off too. It wasn't like egregious, like to the point where we couldn't like recover if the offense had been able to just generate points. Because there came a time when we started to generate really high quality shots and then just no one could hit. But in the third quarter run, we weren't generating like the best shot. It was like, I don't know how many threes Jokic took in that third quarter, but it was too many considering he didn't hit like any of them. I think he hit one finally in like the fourth quarter. But that was like the main, I think, adjustment was like, and you have to give credit to him, like Ant's defensive pressure on Jamal when the best defenders on his team, supposedly, in Nikhil and Jaden, weren't doing shit. So that's just like an interesting, like, I didn't see that coming as a wrinkle in this matchup, as much as, you know, we'd scouted ways that Jamal was probably going to try to beat this or that defender or this or that coverage. And then there were some bad turnovers in the third quarter as well. It was just like, yeah, it kind of reminded me of a game earlier in the season where it was soon after Cat went out with his meniscus tear, and the Wolves were playing the Clippers, and they went down huge early, like down 22 in the like middle of the second quarter. They went on this huge run to cut the lead down to like single digits. It might have been 5 or something going into the half, and then they completely boat raced the Clippers in the second half, just completely destroyed them. And that was the game where there was the infamous, not anonymous quote, but one of the reporters said that they overheard unnamed Timberwolves talking about the Clippers. And the quote was something like, them expletives old. And it was like, and there was another sentence, something like that. And I'm like, man, they kind of did that to us. And it really, like this, it really highlighted some of the limitations that the current roster has, in particular without Bruce, like having an athletic skilled ball handler. Christian is not quite that yet, although he had some really nice attacks, runs at the rim in particular in the first half of this game. I was like, man, they're just giving him this runway, and he took it. And I was like, he played really well in this game. So there were definitely, you know, bright spots to talk about, but Nuggets lost, their season is over, and now we have to move on. So
I kind of wonder where Jokic's mindset was in regards to his 3-point shot, because going into the game, we all knew that was going to be a shot that he would be able to take if he wanted to, mostly because the Wolves were, I guess, quote unquote, giving it.
Yeah, because Cat was going under on everything, and so any off-ball action, Jokic was going to be able to generate a lot of space to get out to that 3-point line.
And the Wolves knew what weaknesses the Nuggets had in terms of 3-point shooting and inability to create rim pressure outside of just like Jokic post-ups and Murray's pick and rolls, which they were guarding and doing well on guarding, with Murray's limitations also thrown into that with his injuries. But
I like that you mentioned that specific, like the lack of other avenues to generate rim pressure, because it's something that I have been annoyed by the entire season, and it really showed itself in this series in particular.
Yeah, and so I get, and this like does lead all back to the idea of depth for the Nuggets. And I know a lot of people are saying, you know, well, now that we know the Nuggets didn't get out of the second round and they didn't repeat, it's easy to say, you know, the depth was the biggest problem. And, you know, losing Bruce was just such a blow. And everyone was right who said losing Bruce meant that the Nuggets were not going to repeat. I like have a complete like resistance to this idea. And I'm not saying that theory is completely wrong because obviously you're going to be better if you have Bruce. Like you're going to be better if you have dudes who are like him, who's like a stocky, like wing guard hybrid who can guard people, who can create rim pressure, who can maybe shoot threes, who can defend, who can give Jamal some minutes where he can rest. Of course, like I get that. I'm not saying
Yeah.
we don't want that, but I just feel like because of how this series played out, we could have won it. Like we were right there. We were 20 points up. And it's like I get that people are saying the starters were exhausted in that game and therefore just couldn't win it. And I guess you can blame whatever you want for that, whether Malone rid them too hard ending the season and trying to get the 1 seed or whatever it was. Like I just think it's hard to know exactly what happened. Like it's hard to just say, well, the starters were tired because they tried really hard down the stretch. It's like this is the NBA.
Yeah.
LeBron went to 8 finals in a
Ah.
row.
Oh my God. Look at that conference, Will.
I know, but still, you're
That
playing till
doesn't that
June.
doesn't that didn't happen in the West.
I know, but you're playing till June every year and coming back short off seasons. And it's like,
Yeah.
I would get it if it was like, wow, we've gone to the finals 2 years in a row. We're tired. But it's like, we've only done it one time. And so I
But
just
you
am a
have to think
little
about the
more,
fact that Jokic has had long off seasons even without going to the finals last year because he was playing internationally. I think the two
hmm
summers before that, or at least the summer before, like he flew into preseason with like he had just come back from playing in
yeah, that's true.
was it I forget the FIBA competition that he was in for Serbia, and then the year before that was, let's see, 2021. Was that another international one for him? And then before that, it was the bubble season that was like it ended right before the regular season was supposed to start. So that's
hmm
like 3 years without a full off season in a
Yep,
row for him in
that's true.
particular. I mean,
That's true. I just like trusted, like we talked about this before the series started in the preview about each team's motor and their conditioning. And I thought the Nuggets were going to have the advantage because we have altitude on our side and we've done these runs before. But I
hmm
guess if you
and in
total it all
particular, we
up,
talked about with the Wolves, like the amount of energy that it takes specifically to be as good defensively as they are.
yeah. And if you total it all up, I guess like you just did, then I guess you can understand more why the Nuggets are more tired and the Wolves are more
Or
fresh,
at
where,
least Jokic
you know,
specifically.
yeah, where the Wolves are, quote unquote younger, just because of Ant and like Jaden and those players. Obviously, they have Conley and they have Cat and they have Gobert, who are veterans who have made, well, Gobert has made playoff runs and so has Mike Conley, but Cat has had less. So he's had long off seasons.
He
Um,
also got like, I mean, he had to have meniscus surgery, so that's not fun, and then
yeah,
rehab from that. But he wasn't playing for over a month at the end of the regular season as well.
yeah,
But
you know,
there's like arguments on both sides of that because you say, well, his conditioning's not up. On the other hand, he
mhm.
isn't like exhausted from having to, play that run. So it's hard to answer the specific question of conditioning, which is why you and I also said that the thing that could also help the Wolves in this particular argument, if you're trying to figure out like who's going to have the conditioning edge and like knowing how much it takes to like make the deep run, is that the Wolves' depth would help them there. One of the
hmm
things that was pretty obvious in both game one and game seven. So Cat gets in foul trouble at the end of both of those games. Goes out in the like middle of the fourth quarter with 5 fouls. Nas comes in for him, and he provides this like big energy spark at that position, and he gets big putback dunks in both game one and game seven in those fourth quarters, right? And he's making these big plays, blocks, getting offensive and defensive rebounds, right? And it's just one of those things where obviously, like, altitude be damned, if you've been sitting on the bench for the last 15 minutes, like, you're going to have more energy, right?
hmm
And like, I don't want this to sound too much like a cope segment, right? We're trying to just kind of work through this issue of how tired were they? How much of a part did that play? It clearly wasn't the sole reason that they lost this series, right? The Wolves were just better this year. They were right about that. They felt that I'm pretty sure they said that after um, they won the first game that they played in Denver this season. I think it was Jaden McDaniels who said it. But you have to believe that in order to be able to beat this team. 'Cause I think this Nuggets team is still really good, despite some of the limitations that they had after they lost Bruce and Jeff last summer. Obviously, that's why we thought that they could win the title. So at the end of the day, like, they just didn't perform, and there are reasons for it, but they're not excuses, right?
I don't know what the reason is, but the exhaustion reason I always hate, because I'm just like, you're NBA
Yeah.
players, like get over it and play the game and win it. I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care that you're tired. You're supposed to play a lot. It's supposed to be
Yeah.
hard. You're supposed to be tired. I get that the depth would have helped a lot, and I want the Nuggets to have as much depth as they possibly can so that they are fresh and can perform at their best. And if the Nuggets go into this offseason and they say that's what we need, and they, I'm sure that they're going to think that on some level, they're going to go try to get more contributors. So that's awesome. But,
It'll be interesting to talk about when we get to that point and talk about, like, depth is great, but like depth where? Like, what are the specific things that we would like, either where it's like a complementary thing that is not currently like on the roster, in particular a like rim pressuring, wing or guard, or is it more redundancy, say at the big spot, which we've talked about throughout the season, obviously not on this podcast because this podcast is pretty new, that can kind of spell, rest for Jokic, AG, etc. I will say that in addition to this, adds to the sort of exhaustion narrative, whatever, and the depth piece, the starters in particular played a lot heavier minutes through rounds 1 and 2 this year than they did last year. And part of that is not having, Bruce in particular, but also Jeff, just to like trustworthy people that Malone would like put in those minutes, so that, MPJ played more minutes per game, I think, than he did even in the late rounds of the playoffs last year, when Malone was like even tighter with his rotation. He was playing like 38 plus minutes a game against the Lakers, and I'm pretty sure Jokic has been playing 40 minutes a game since the beginning of the playoffs. And I remember last year when I was watching that Sun series, it was very clear that Booker and Katie were just completely gassed by the end of that series, which doesn't excuse their elimination game performance in Game 6, obviously. But it was just this like building narrative where they had like no depth on that team last year, and they were playing those guys like 42, 44 minutes a night through the first 2 rounds. And it was definitely something in the back of my mind as round 1 proceeded, and as we got through the late stages of this round 2 against the Wolves as well, that I don't want to be in the position where the starters, all of them, like, there were nights when AG is playing 40 plus minutes a night, and that's very unusual for him even through the playoffs last year. So that's something for, the front office to consider as well, because you want them to be able to perform at their best, not just be out there. And not that they were going through the motions, but they couldn't be as effective as they would if they could just put everything into their more limited time. Look at Ant, right? Like, he didn't have a great, at least offensively, Game 7 either. And he was playing 44, 45 minutes a night since Game 4, which was like he only sat in Game 4 for like 5 minutes, I think. And the Wolves went like minus 18 in that 5 minutes. And so they started playing more minutes even than that in the subsequent games. He wasn't as effective. It was really a lot of Cat and Mike Conley kind of organizing the others. And obviously the Nuggets won those games until game 6 and 7. But Ant even couldn't be as effective offensively when he's playing 45 plus minutes a night. So it's not just a like, oh, our guys aren't like conditioned or young or athletic enough. That's just like we need to figure out how to optimize performance of our best players kind of thing.
I was excited to get to the playoffs because I wanted to have, I wanted the shorter rotation games, like, because they're exciting because you get to see their best punches and their best lineups.
Yeah.
You played, and obviously you can't play the starting 5 48 minutes a game. But I think in a Game 7 situation like this against a really good team, you should be able to play Jokic and these dudes 40 plus minutes on to win the game, to seal the series. And so if they're like, well, they played Jokic too much in the game, I'm just like, why isn't he able to do it? And right. I'm just like, and it's not because Bruce Brown isn't on the team. So I just got annoyed with that. And I get it. It's still like a valid point but I wasn't using it as like the sole reason why we lost that game,
Yeah, no,
you
I
know.
don't think you
And
were.
yeah, well, I just saw other people saying it, and I was arguing against them, much to
Yeah,
their anger. But I just think, yeah, the starters, they lost the minutes in this game by a lot, and they were minus
they did.
60. And obviously they got blown out in some games, and when they're not playing perfectly, they're losing by a ton, which is why a 20-point lead was not safe against them, because we were losing games by 40 and 30. So in a second half, in a third quarter, where you're making mistakes and you're not hitting shots, you're going to get smoked by the Wolves, which is what basically happened. So, but then I started thinking, well, if this is how they were looking against the Wolves in this game, how are they going to be against the Mavs next series? So
Oh, I was
yeah.
like, if they get out of this game, they are gonna get. I wouldn't think they're gonna get blown out in game one, but I was like, they're definitely losing game one. Even though I know, like in every game one, the Mavs have had slow starts in the first two rounds, whatever. And Luca in particular is like a work himself into the game kind of player. So it's just
Hmm.
there would have been a different pace, frankly, than either of the first two opponents.
Yeah.
But even still, I was like, game one is just a scheduled L if they
Yeah.
make it out of this. I thought that even if, like, after the first half, because, like, man, they're just flying around on defense right now. The last thing that I'll say about the conditioning thing is it's tough because I love Jokic so much. And we all know the story about after their last, it was a game seven at home when they lost to Portland. Is that right? The quadruple overtime game. So
Hmm.
I'm like, well, I guess game sevens at home are actually cursed for this team. So let's just like not go for home court advantage, I guess.
Yeah.
After that game, he goes to Malone and says, I never want that to, like, I don't want to let that happen again, like, where he gets too exhausted to, like, win them this game. I'm like, man, he went to quadruple overtime, man. I don't know what you're talking about. And we're constantly praising him for his conditioning. And while I want to cut him some slack because, like I mentioned, like, he hasn't had a full off season in 3 years at least, and we credited his conditioning, especially through that first round where it was like this war of attrition against the Lakers at the ends of like all of these games. But the like he got beat in that department in this game. I thought that, and part of it is like Minnesota just has these bigs that wear you down in every facet of the game, because finally with Mike Conley back, Rudy's now involved in the offense, and uh Yoke was guarding really well in the first half, not so well in the second half. And then you have like Nas or Cat flying in for putbacks all the time. Like they just have a really active and multifaceted front court that he's got to work against on both ends of the floor. And they wore him down in this game. And that showed in not just his shot selection, but the fact that he was missing all of those shots in the second half as well. And I think that it's something, just to acknowledge. It's not really something to knock him on. Like, I'm not worried that his conditioning is going to be like bad next year, you know, per se, even if he does end up participating in the Olympics for Team Serbia, because he gives his team really like as much as he can. And we've seen it. We've seen it, right? We saw at the beginning of this season when Jamal was hurt and the team was going through like back to backs and like 5-7s and 3-5s, whatever, like just nonstop games, that he was pushing them through these really dense parts of the schedule with these ridiculous performances with very little help, because like AG started off the season pretty slow. Jamal was hurt, as we talked about. MPJ started off the season slow because he had the ankle thing, whatever, right? And Jokic he's this like steady train, and it sucks to like critique him in this particular moment on this particular issue, because he is the most stable, like solid, like reliable, not just member of this team but probably player in the entire NBA. But it just wasn't enough in that second half. And it's not just on him. Like there's a bunch of blame to go around. Like you said, like lots of guys weren't able to contribute, whether it's making shots or getting stops. Like it was so horrible down the end of this game where we were just not getting any stops. That's how I knew that like the clutch was not going to go well, because that whole like you get to the 8-minute mark of the fourth and I'm like, I don't think we've gotten a stop yet this whole quarter. It was really tough. But that's the kind of thing that you can turn to the other teammates as well and like, look, guys, if you're not making shots, like help us get a stop here. like the one like put back that I think Nas flew in for. It was either Nas or Cat. KCP misses a box out because he's put in like this ridiculous position all series where he's the primary on Ant. And I know that in the series last year was Bruce closing those games to be on Ant because he's like closer to like Christian's size and like that kind of thing. And Ant was still cooking, so whatever. But it turned into this whole thing and they just got beat. I
Yeah.
don't know what else to say.
Obviously, MPJ couldn't hit a shot, so he's getting a ton of blame. And I felt so sad for him after I heard that he apologized to the team. It's like, yeah, if his shot was hitting, maybe we win that game. But it really was everyone, the team, the coaches, the front office. I would say everyone did pretty much as good as they could have done this season relative to the constraints that were on them, whether that was exhaustion, injury, depth, expensive starting five, whatever it is. So I'm not going to like single out any single person or thing. Obviously, I think Zeke not being reliable,
Decent, an NBA
yeah,
player.
was a
We will get
huge
to that.
one of the biggest things I think, which is an underrated reason, was just the mentality and focus and malaise that the Nuggets kind of had on and off throughout the whole season, which we had thought that they just wanted to get to the postseason, and then once they get there, they're going to turn on the Jets. It just never really happened. It happened in some games. It happened in some moments in the postseason in the Lakers and the Wolves series, but it was not happening enough to win the title. They were not looking like a championship team. So, I'm hoping with this offseason and coming back, they'll have more of that mentality. But I really think that was a huge factor. And I also don't attribute that to not having Bruce Brown, because I heard someone say that without Bruce Brown, they just didn't have the same fire to play. And I'm just like, that's completely absurd. Like, this is Jokic and Murray and Gordon. Like, they're going to be able to, like, be motivated to play if they want to, but they just weren't this year. And it's hard to repeat. It's hard to keep that hunger from year to year. Like, special teams and special players are able to do that. And I'm hoping that we will be able to after this disappointment. Hopefully they'll learn from it, and hopefully everyone will be better next year, including Calvin Booth, if he comes up with some nice solutions for us, which we'll get into more later.
We will definitely talk a lot about the Wolves when we get to our conference finals preview. But yeah, they did really well. This was a huge victory for them, obviously, making the conference finals for the first time since 2004 with Kevin Garnett. And it came after a really weird series where they go up 2-0. They blow that lead by losing 2 games at home. The Nuggets go up 3-2 on them. And then they punch back in game 6. Game 7 comes around and the Nuggets are rolling in the first half, playing great defense. They can't get anything going. I mean, both teams shot pretty poorly from 3 in this game also. And really, the Nuggets had all but completely shut down Ant in the first half and really most of the second half as well. I think like AG did a really good job, like a much better job on him than I thought would be possible whenever he was left in those single coverage situations. But the other guys stepped up. This was really a team effort. It was a lot of Rudy keeping it from getting too out of hand by stopping things at the rim in the first half. Rudy and Jaden both had great plays in that respect. Nas coming in to spot Cat after he gets those 5 fouls in the fourth, same as game 1, as I mentioned before. And then Mike Conley. I mean, Jokic shouted out Mike Conley after the game. It's like, I think he's the most underrated player in the NBA. I think that Derek White lost that title because everyone says that now, and when everyone says you're overrated, you're not underrated, you're not underrated anymore. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he does always make the right play. He makes Ant's job a lot easier. He makes Cat's job a lot easier. He integrates Rudy into the offense, and he just keeps those guys organized out there. And I have no doubt that he has some influence defensively as well, just with keeping everyone's heads cool and keeping guys organized, being that veteran presence out there as well. He hit some shots. He hit like one ridiculous one, end of clock. I think he had 2 actually. One was a pull up and one was a spot up corner 3 with like 0.2 left on the clock or something in this game. So it really was a team effort, and it was really, if you're not a Nuggets fan, it was really cool to see everyone step up in this game after they had a really shaky couple of games, especially in game 3, 4, and 5, relative to what the team needed when the Nuggets were like making this big series comeback, it seemed like, right? And they kept cool. They didn't crack. And that's a really big deal for a team that is mostly pretty young. Like we've talked about this before. The Wolves are young, but they're not that young when they have Rudy and Conley. And Cat's not that young. It's not his first, rodeo in the playoffs, though it is the first time that he's made it this far. And so it'll be interesting to watch this team, just fight through the later rounds of the playoffs.
Well, let's go to another series with a team that is kind of getting some interesting criticisms as well about being possibly overplayed. We're moving to Knicks Pacers. Obviously, the Pacers won. The Knicks had tons of injuries. OG was injured. Jalen Brunson ended up getting injured in Game 7.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. He totally did. He broke his hand. He broke his left hand in Game 7.
Did he break his hand because Tibbs just played him too much?
Yeah, no, I don't. Okay, there are legitimate criticisms that you can make about Tibbs overplaying, in particular his starters, especially at the end of the regular season. And there are certain injuries that you could say were made more possible because of being overplayed. I'm not a doctor, but you could make the argument that Josh Hart's abdominal strain came from, it was a particular incident that led to it, but maybe, without as much wear and tear on his body from playing 48 minutes a night, 48 plus in some instances, minutes a night for really the entire second half of the season, going and then through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Sure. OG's hamstring, I don't know. OG kind of has an injury history, so I don't know what to do with that. And he also didn't play as many minutes as the other guys because he had his injury in the middle of the season, right? But yeah, they just had some freak stuff happen. Like Julius hurt his shoulder months ago on, I believe it was a dunk attempt. It might have been, I don't think it was against the Lakers, but a lot of people hurt their shoulders against the Lakers, like jaw. Brunson fracturing his left hand is not because he was playing too many minutes. That they just had really terrible injury luck. I actually think that even without Brunson getting injured, OG being injured really killed New York in this series. I said they could still win because they had figured out some avenues, but part of it would have had to be on Indiana to sort of not show up like they did in certain games against the Bucks. Instead, even though they hadn't really looked amazing in any road game in this series, they showed up in Game 7 just ready to fight, right off the bat. OG ended up playing the first half of this game, but he was moving horribly. I don't believe he started in the second half, but he was getting really cooked on defense, wasn't getting matched up in transition. He couldn't do much of anything.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was surprised looking at the because I watched these games and OG, I was just like, oh, what are you doing, man? What are you doing out there? You're not doing anything. Siakam's killing you. Oof.
Yeah. And Siakam was killing him throughout most of the series, frankly.
Yeah,
but
so
it almost didn't. The injury didn't matter for that one-on-one defense, but he was just a full-on liability when it came to the team scheme as well. I will say, I think Indiana, with the energy that they came into Game 7 with, especially defensively, because I thought that Brunson was forcing a lot in the first half of this game, especially. And he got, hurt very soon after that. But the way that Indiana was defending him really required the others to get more involved. Dante had a huge night for sure. But because OG started, they weren't starting Deuce. But not having that secondary ball handler and initiator in the starting lineup because OG was starting, I think hurt them a lot even before Jalen got hurt. Then he started to force things. There was not as much creation for others. Part of it was Indiana sort of letting him go one-on-one. I think there was a lot more Neesmith on Brunson in this game compared to, say, Game 5, where they really just let him feast on Nembhard a lot. I do think he was a little tired because there were some jump shots that he was just not hitting also. But I didn't love the offensive process from him for most of his stint on the floor. Because once he got the others involved, they were able to create open shots. That's my thing with Indiana's defense. It's they have some decent personnel, but whenever force them to guard an action and they get really confused really fast. It's funny, like they start to look like other teams guarding them whenever they are facing a team that puts them through anything beyond like a basic pick and roll, or maybe a two-man action. Yeah, in this game, especially defensively with the pressure on Brunson, and offensively they were just locked in, like not just continuing on their process. Hallie in particular was so aggressive in Game 7. He was taking basically any opportunity he could to attack the seams that the defense was creating, attacking open lanes. I think there was one sequence in the first half where he just took an open driving lane, got to the rim, and then was like kind of spun himself around in the air because it might have been Hartenstein who was going to recover back to him, but the lefty layup was like totally open there, and instead he ended up turning the ball over, trying to like find a passing angle back to, I believe it was Miles. I like said it at the time, like, oh, he should have taken the layup there. Every time after that, he was just on the attack, trying to score at the rim, trying to score in the mid range, hunting his open threes, and it was just like he was just great. He was attacking Deuce in one-on-one coverages too. He had some post moves that he tried to use. And I'm like, every time I see him do that, because he did it in a couple of games earlier, because to kind of take advantage of the size mismatch that he has over Deuce. So like Deuce is really good guarding him out on the perimeter, but Hallie's just like several inches taller than him. And so he can just shoot over him if you can get close enough to the basket. And Hallie did that. Even though Hallie has also complained in the past about how watching post moves is boring. And so every time I see him do that now, I'm like, I guess they're not that boring when they can be like effective for you. And I love Halliburton, I do, but I think that he has sometimes a little bit too simplistic a view of offense in basketball, but he definitely has, in over the last like half of this series, just been a lot more aggressive and like knowing it's not just like picking your spots. Like there were times where he didn't have to be aggressive and he just like maintained that energy. And so that was really encouraging for a Pacers fan that wants to see them take, a game or two off of Boston, for example, where if you're going to be passive, like Boston is going to be able to take advantage of that. They're going to play the passing lanes every time you have the ball, for example, guard you like Draymond. And there are times in this series where the Knicks were guarding him like Draymond. I think like Game 4 was a really great example of that too. And Hallie hit like, I don't know, six threes in that game. I'm like, guys, he's a good shooter. Stop leaving him open. Because they were just like playing the passes. Once he realized that and started to take advantage of it, it was really, really tough for New York to stop.
Yeah, Siakam hit, I think, like his first 5 shots in the first quarter or something like that. And then, Hallie had 3 threes from that left slot. And God, he did such a great job hitting those shots and being aggressive and just letting it fly. To Game 7, like, everyone says Game 7s are supposed to be tight. You're not supposed to be hitting these shots, but the Pacers were lighting it up. They didn't look phased at all. It looked like it was the start of a new series for them. And the Knicks, they were injured, they were tired, however you want to describe it. They were forcing stuff on offense. On defense, they looked so like just not bringing the same energy. Like even Hartenstein wasn't playing with the same energy. It was just like everyone was just off. LG could barely move. So, yeah, they just kind of, I think they did as good as they could and just ran out of gas, and the game was over really quick, and they just never came back.
This is something that I was very wrong about with respect to this series. I thought that New York would be able to slow Indiana down, but really after the first 2 games, they didn't. They won. Game 5 was their last like impressive win, and that was like hustle and almost a shootout. Like New York shot really well enough. Like they were hustling and they got lots of shot attempts. So they were winning really on offense more than anything, because of that offensive rebounding, in particular from Hartenstein. And maybe he just gave everything he had left in that Game 5. But defensively, I don't think New York did a really good job of slowing Indiana down, even in the games where Halliburton was being more passive. I don't think it was because of anything in particular that New York was doing. Sometimes there was some like good ball denial, in particular by Deuce, that kind of made the other guys make plays. But I don't think that any of it was stuff that Indiana couldn't overcome, and clearly it wasn't, because they did in games 6 and 7. And it wasn't just like slowing them down, like stopping them from making shots. Indiana's a really good offensive team, so that's not it. It was just that throughout the series, there were lots of moments where, even in the games New York won, I felt like there were long stretches where they were just really poor in their communication, and getting back and matched up in transition defense. Lots of times where they're trying to stop the ball in transition, which is like what you want to do against any team. Against this team, you have to get back to Obi Toppin, like ran the floor on them for like transition lobs. I don't know how many times in this series. And it's not like a bad transition defense team isn't capable of like playing good transition defense for a series. Like I saw us play pretty good defense on the Pacers both times that we played them, in particular in transition, where it was something I was really impressed with about the Nuggets in those 2 games against the Pacers. One of them didn't have Halliburton, to be fair, but they're like, they still play the same way even without him. So just in that particular aspect, I was pretty disappointed in the Knicks. I like, regardless of how tired they were, again, and even in the games they won, I don't think they did a really good job of stopping those runouts. And so I thought that maybe earlier on in the series, it would be like, okay, this is just kind of shock. It's one thing to think how this team is going to play and what you need to do. It's another thing to actually experience it and execute what you need to do to slow them down. And so I just think that Indiana largely controlled the pace of this entire series, and maybe I overestimated, or I underestimated the impact that would have over the course of 7 games. Because clearly, you get to the end, yes, New York has all these injuries, but even before like Brunson went out, for example, Indiana was controlling the pace in a lot of these games. And so that's just something to think about moving forward. Like we had, Indiana has gotten like some injury luck for sure in the first 2 series that they played. I do think that they present some unique challenges for Boston, and we'll talk about that when we get to the conference finals preview, but it's something that I'm keeping in mind so that I don't, underestimate this Pacers team with respect to the specific aspects of their play that seem to give other teams issues regardless of the quality of that other team.
One thing we didn't touch on, which we can talk about now and then move on to Mavs Thunder, but Aaron Nesmith was amazing for the Pacers in Game 7, just with little drive pull-up shots, good on defense, just really showed some versatility on both sides that was key. And I mean, all the Pacers shot really well, which is like another knock against the Knicks' defense in Game 7, where they really, really did struggle to get them out of any rhythm because the Pacers were just like getting whatever they wanted and just knocking down these shots. It was kind of weird to see, definitely unexpected. So I don't think you should beat yourself up. Not that you are, but I think we all thought the Knicks were going to limit the Pacers a little bit. And the Pacers just really showed up and knocked down those shots and looked pretty formidable on offense. And the Knicks are a little banged up. The Bucks had no Giannis, so now they're going to be playing Boston with KP slated to return, is what I was hearing, that he's going to be back for the conference finals. I don't know when, though. I think it's just, are the Pacers going to be able to bring enough on the defensive end? Because offensively, they can definitely do it. It's just, what are they going to muster on the defensive end, which we can talk about in the conference finals preview. But yeah. Is there anything else?
No, just, another young team that really showed up in a big way in a Game 7 that nobody really expected them to. So I think that is starting to become just like this recurrent theme of these playoffs. When we decided to talk about young players experiencing the postseason for the first time in our playoff preview, I didn't necessarily expect to see so many big performances in big spots this late in the playoffs from Halliburton. Well, I guess Ant, but it was Ant like defensively in particular. SGA was really good through the first 2 rounds. Like, he's not really the reason that the Thunder didn't win that series. And Derek Lively, like I can't hype that kid enough. Like, I really loved him throughout the whole season, and we're about to talk about him as we get to Mavs Thunder. But whether it's these stars or most of the role players that we talked about too. Like we talked about Christian Brown coming through in a really big way throughout that series against the Wolves. You know, he's not Bruce Brown, but I thought that he, frankly, like exceeded my expectation for him in that series, uh, despite the loss. So there have been a lot of standout performances from these young players, and I just wanted to shout them out.
But how about also shouting out just role players, whether
Yeah,
you consider them stars or role players, whatever you want to do. But like Miles Turner hit some shots, Neesmith hit shots.
yeah, he's not missing
Um,
right now.
then you got for the Wolves, you got Jaden McDaniels hit the threes that he needed. You got Rudy Gobert hitting insane, stupid floaters over
Oh
everybody.
my God,
Whatever,
we
like
gotta include the clip of, I believe Dave Dufour called it the Arc de Triomphe
oh god,
when Rudy hit this ridiculous turnaround fadeaway midi from, it was something like 15 feet or something over Jokic at the end of a shot clock in the fourth quarter, and I was like, all right, we're done. This is it.
yeah,
I
exactly.
talked about us not getting stops, and that would have been one if like anything normal happened. He also hit
Yeah,
like a crazy floater, I think, in game one. Like that's why the fourth quarter of this game felt like it felt like game one, but the opposite. Because remember, the Wolves came out to the great start in game one, but it was like the same ending, basically.
yeah. I did think it was similar to game one, except for like the big run that the Wolves went on wasn't at the very beginning of the game; it was just in the third quarter.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and
Right down
like
to Nas coming in
the
for
Nas
Pat with
put
foul trouble
back.
and then put back. Yeah.
The same thing. And like just the Wolves players were just stepping up and like good for them. They got what they needed. We didn't get anything of what we needed out of anyone, unfortunately. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, Mavs Thunder game 6. The Mavs win and move on to the Western Conference Finals. It was a interesting game. It was very close in spots. The Thunder did get up by what was the largest lead they had in that game? It was like 15 or something,
I think we're
16.
up
I
at
don't
like
know.
17 at one point.
Something like that.
That was a
And
weird game.
it was really weird.
Another weird game in the playoffs.
I didn't like what I was watching most of the time, but thank you to Derek Lively for making it exciting. Because he's got all these offensive rebounds and these put back tip ins. Obviously, that was a huge story of the game was the rebounding, and I do think it's hilarious that the Thunder's kind of downfall was the defensive glass, which everyone had been obviously saying. But Lively did a great job getting rebounds. There was some sequences where they got multiple offensive rebounds and were able to kick out and get some shots. But a lot of it was just like Luca and SGA just ISO balling. And SGA obviously did amazing. There's a lot of like little like mid range backing down somebody, turning around jumpers or whatever have you. Obviously, I don't think SGA was the reason they lost. There was a stretch in the third quarter where he missed a bunch of shots, and the Mavs kind of almost got back in it. And then halfway through the third, he started hitting more and extended the lead back to like 10 or 13 or something. And then the Mavs came back again. But I did think it was interesting in that third quarter how just the presence of Lively and kind of like playing drop in that paint when SJ was driving, he put up like a ton of tough floaters. He wasn't like getting to his normal like mid-range jumper. It was a lot of weird floaters and just like missed a ton of them. So it's like, yeah, credit to the Mavs defense on that because I think without that and if SGA just maybe, I don't know should he have just taken more jumpers or whatever and just like put them to bed in that game? Because even in the fourth quarter, they went away from SGA, I thought too much. But what did you see with that whole dynamic going on?
Yeah, the whole game was like a very strange flow to me. So, just like in game five, the Thunder start Isaiah Joe over Josh Giddey. It didn't work in game five to my eye. Like, I don't think that the stretches with Isaiah Joe on the floor were necessarily the most productive, even though the Thunder scored decently well in game five. So, game six comes around, and it's some of the same issues where SGA has a lot more ball handling and initiation responsibilities. And so a lot of the things that Giddey does that make his life easier, not coming through, obviously, with Giddey off the floor. Now, Giddey just absolutely does kill their spacing. However, There's more to spacing than just being able to shoot, especially against this Mavs team that has been pretty locked in when it comes to their closeouts on shooters in this series. I think Isaiah Joe gets another early corner three, I think similar to game 5. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be one of those nights. Thunder end up going on a bit of a run, but most of it is fueled by Mavs turnovers. And some of them are forced by OKC. Like, they're a really good team at forcing turnovers and getting out and running. However, a lot of them were just like the Mavs just like feeding them the ball. And I said this at the time, like, if this game stays in the half court, like, the Thunder would have been blown out, I think, in the first half. The Mavs end up making a run to come back and tie the game. I think they took a 1-point lead. And then from there, they were just like getting mad at the refs, turning the ball over more, just taking some bad shots. And the Thunder end up going on a big run to lead by something like 15 at half. So the third quarter comes around and the Mavs decide, okay, let's try to like execute on both ends of the floor. They stop turning the ball over and they continue playing the great defense, especially in the half court that they had been all game and all series. And they end up cutting into that lead. Like you said, SGA hit a lot of tough jumpers toward the end of the third quarter to try to push OKC's lead back out to something like 10 going into the fourth quarter. And then I just thought, honestly, that the game was decided by how many minutes Derek Lively played. I mean,
yeah,
it had almost nothing to do with the Mavs offense either, because both bigs sort of, not that they clog up the spacing, because I actually think throughout the season that the Mavs offense just looked a lot better when Lively was on the floor as a roller. It's one of the reasons that Luka has wanted a rolling big for the last few years. And it's something that he noted at some point this season, that he had been kind of pestering the front office about, like, can I get a rolling big, like a real center and then a backup center? And I think it was after the Gafford trade that he made these comments, because it helps them. However, both Gafford and Lively are not like the best finishers around, like a real rim protector. And Chet is a real rim protector. Like, he was amazing in this series. I thought in this game, Lively and Gafford both kind of got the best of Chet at the rim.
Yeah.
Part of it was that Luka was a little bit more patient with his reads in that pick and roll, and he started to get to that floater area a little bit quicker, to the point where Chet started biting on it and then leaving the space open to throw that lob. And Gafford and Lively were actually finishing those shots. They had not been finishing anything at the rim before this game. The difference for me was on defense, because the Mavs like to do a lot of like middle of the clock switching with their bigs. And Gafford was just getting cooked by SGA whenever they did that. And it was a lot of like SGA after pulling them out of the paint to try to ISO them. And it was very effective on Gafford. Or trying to, like, let's pull them out of the paint, move the ball around. Like I mentioned in our last episode, that was another way that OKC kind of attacked better, because they don't like to play as much drop with Gafford, so they switched with him a lot more onto the perimeter. But then SGA would move the ball around to somebody else to try to attack the rim, and then they'd get a free run to the rim without a big there. Not a free run, because they just have to beat their initial defender off the dribble. And that's usually pretty tough for anybody on the Thunder besides SGA and J-Dub. So it wasn't as effective when J-Dub was off the floor, for example. Like, one of them could pull the big out and the other one could attack. Like I said, with Lively, they would do some switching, and he basically got cooked every time. There were a couple of times when he got a stop on SGA, but a lot of it was like SGA is able to hit those tough shots. With Lively, they play a lot more drop, and they keep Lively on whoever's in the dunker spot. This was something that was actually interesting. Again, I think they started to do some of this in Game 5 as well. A big adjustment from Dagnall was that they started playing Chet in the dunker spot more, and they would often run an initial action to try to get Chet there. Now, what that does is it stops Lively from helping so much on SGA's drives whenever he's beating his initial defender, whether it's PJ or Derrick Jones Jr. more often than not. That keeps Lively like playing back, because he doesn't want Chet to get to that lob. When it's anybody else on the Thunder in the dunker spot, they're not worried about the lob play, and they can easily recover if SGA or whoever's driving gets to that dump off pass. With Chet there, he's a real lob threat, and he can finish over those guys. Although I think in some instances, I think Lively in particular did pretty well recovering after he did help. But for the most part, he was playing back because he didn't want to leave that lob open, which meant that SGA wasn't playing in quite as much of a crowd whenever he was driving. It was one of the things that like a lot of people on Twitter complained about throughout the series, how Dagnall was keeping Chet on the perimeter. They like to play a lot of pick and pop with him. But when they would run an initial pick and roll and get Chet like rolled, now he's down to the rim and he's in the dunker spot, or they just like use that as the primary and like the main action on that possession, they can throw a lob to Chet and he can just finish there. And if not, like SGA gets that free driving range, free driving lane on that.
Was it Lively who got like switched out onto SGA and like very late in the game when the Thunder took the lead on the Chet lob in the dunker spot? I can't remember which defender, but the play that got them the lead very late. If it was late in the game,
it was Lively because Lively played the entire fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing. I was talking to, I think it was Alex Hoops on Twitter, because he had tweeted something about how when the Mavs were going on their third quarter run, like he was like, man, Dags is once again not calling a timeout. And it was funny because I think a half hour earlier, I specifically commented on the fact that Dagnall did not call a timeout during the second quarter run that the Mavs made. And then it ended with like a massive run by the Thunder to take a double-digit lead into the half. I was like, well, he just knows that the team knows what to do, keep executing, whatever. But then I saw Alex Hoops tweet like a half hour later about the third quarter run and the lack of a timeout. And I shared my thoughts. Like, I think Dagnall just like trusts his team and they know what they need to keep doing. But he also knows they just have to survive the Lively minutes and then take advantage of Gafford whenever he's on the floor. So it's something at that point in the game, it was something like Gafford was like a minus 22 and Lively was a plus 18. And the Mavs were down in that game, obviously, right? Because those two have mutually exclusive minutes. But that's exactly what was happening. Both weren't like the best on offense throughout the whole series. They were both a little bit better in game 6. And that in terms of just being able to finish at the rim, frankly, and make good short roll passing decisions because OKC was often tagging both of them high on that pick and roll. Defensively, the difference was gigantic because even though both can kind of protect the rim some, they almost never play like an effective drop with Gafford. And so they were often either switching with him or weird like hedge and recover schemes, whatever. So he wasn't always at the rim. But Lively, they could keep him there, and he was a little bit better at recovering even when he does have to either switch out or whatever, because he's just more agile. He's bigger than Gafford. He's a true like 7 foot or 7'1". Gafford is like, I don't know, 6'9", 6'10". Yeah, I was just really impressed with Dereck Lively in this game. Like I cannot say enough good things about this kid. He was what was it, 17th in the draft or something? I don't know if that technically counts as lottery. Maybe not 17th because I was like Pajemski, but he was like 12th or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Mavs tanked for him, and tanking isn't like, the best, but they got a real gem with him. He's a great rim protector. He's a great lob finisher, super athletic, great energy, great motor. And he just he grabbed so many rebounds in this game too. At one point, he had like 15 rebounds in like 23 minutes of play. I don't know how many he finished with, but that's like a big problem that Dallas just has or had in the past, where like teams grabbed so many offensive rebounds on them and they just couldn't finish their defensive possessions, even when they got that, initial stop. And he grabbed a lot of really big defensive rebounds down the stretch of this game as well. And offensive rebounds too. Like he was really giving Chet work on the glass. And that was like a big difference between the two to me. I know that I cut Chet some slack because he is like this they use him more as like a roaming rim protector, which often gets you out of position for defensive rebounds. But I think that Lively does a good job of towing the line and doing both. I've gone on and on about Dereck Lively, but I love this kid. I think he's been so good for Dallas. And I can't, if you're the front office for the Dallas Mavericks, you can't help but feel that he has just fully exceeded expectations that you could have for a rookie playing in the playoffs as effectively like a starter level impact.
If the Nuggets could find a big who could contribute like that in some minutes, that would be amazing. Not that if he was that good down the road, may not be able to keep him, but yeah, they hit a home run with him. So we can complain about tanking, but is reality in the NBA that this is a way to get some good players. Obviously, the the Warriors in their dynasty had some high draft pick opportunities that they completely blew. So still have to give the Mavs credit for drafting him. So they made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals this season. I never would have predicted that they would have done that. So good for them. They look like one of the best teams in the West, like to close the season. So I mean, from that perspective, it wasn't necessarily surprising. But before the season, I definitely wasn't thinking that. So
Let's go ahead and move to our conference finals preview now. Before we give our predictions, let's talk about, I think there are two key questions whenever you're going into these series. It's who are the X factors and who are the known key matchups, like this person versus this important person on this team versus this important person on this team. And it's either going to be offensively or defensively, whatever. And then there are the X factors, like we don't know what this player is going to bring to the table, and whatever they do could end up swinging, or whatever they do or don't do could end up swinging games or the series, right? Let's talk about the key matchups first. And let's start with the Eastern Conference, since we often overlook the Eastern Conference for obvious reasons. I have my main key matchup in Celtics Pacers being Tatum versus Siakam, for the sole reason that they play the same position. I think one of the things that has made Tatum incredibly effective at the power forward position in a way that works to Boston's benefit most of the time with the way that they like to play is that he is often a plus rebounder for his position against most teams that they play. Has been throughout the playoffs. The Cavs were missing Jarrett Allen, so he wasn't really going against Evan Mobley on the boards, although I think that Evan Mobley is a negative rebounder for his position. But Tatum is not like the biggest power forward. We don't have a league where we have a lot of Aaron Gordons, for example, at that 4 position. And so he's often, like I said, the bigger player at that position. He is really strong and he's really fast, especially even for somebody his size. And I think that the glass is going to play a really important role in most games in this series, just because both teams have a lot of offensive firepower. And so it's going to be more about getting stops, but you have to finish those possessions. In the last game that the Celtics and Pacers played in the regular season, I don't remember if that was a game that went down to the wire and Indiana lost. But after the game, Missoula talked about how many offensive rebounds the Celtics gave up to that Pacers team. And even he talked about, like, I'm not even worried about our players' effort there. It's just they're a team that just keeps coming at you. And the Celtics are not like an amazing defensive rebounding team, but Tatum is definitely a strength of theirs there. And that's just going to be one of those like swing factors in the series. And that's why I say Tatum versus Siakam is a key matchup. I don't think either can guard the other, frankly. So I just think that they're both going to score really well whenever, given those opportunities. But it's going to be more about what both do on the glass.
It's like, what are they going to do each in their roles with, on the glass and on defense, and how are they going to shoot? Obviously, Siakam had a pretty good shooting series versus the Knicks. We know Tatum can score, so we'll see how he does. I don't think it's not like the Pacers have this amazing defense, but I think one of the other key matchups obviously is going to be Halliburton versus Drew and Derek White.
Yeah, definitely.
Hallie is still growing. We saw him have ups and downs in Knicks and in the Knicks series. So how aggressive is he going to be? How's he going to handle the way they guard him? Is he going to defer? Is he going to be shooting like without hesitation? How's it going to be? Obviously, Derek White and Drew are amazing defenders. Drew can guard, he has such versatility, as we've covered on the show as well. But, we'll see how often he guards Tyrese in this series or not. But you want to make our actual prediction now for this series?
I think everyone might be pretty shocked to hear I'm going to pick the Celtics against the Pacers.
Yes.
I just think that they're too good defensively. They're going to get more stops than Indiana will. I think that the Celtics play a smart brand of offense for most of a game, not necessarily in the clutch, but whatever. For most of a game, lots of ball movement. They run a lot of initial actions, not like a lot in the same possession necessarily, but like I said, I think Indiana sometimes often struggles with that when it's not just about like guarding your guy. They're going to have to hide Halliburton a lot, and I think the Celtics are going to be pretty ruthless and aggressive in hunting that matchup. And it's not just going to be about Hallie one-on-one, because all of the hedging that the Pacers like to do with him is going to result in creating open shots for the other Celtics, open driving lanes for the other Celtics. Yeah, so I think I'm going to go with Boston on that one.
Yeah, I'm also picking Boston, probably in like 5. I mean,
I
just like they've
actually
been doing.
I actually want to know who you think the X factors are for this series
I'm gonna go with.
for both teams. Like pick one.
I want to go with like Neesmith, just because I think he's gonna be important to. If they are gonna get defensive intensity, he's gonna have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's gonna give them a chance to like take some games. Whether he's like guarding, like who do you see him guarding? Even he's gonna be guarding Tatum. Gonna
I
be
think they'll put
guarding.
him on Tatum.
Yeah.
Tatum Siakam's not a good matchup on Tatum just because Tatum is so quick for somebody his
Mhm.
size. And I like they've put Neesmith on Giannis before. Like they'll just put him
Yeah.
on anybody.
I
He's
don't think he.
actually like super versatile. Like he did a
Yeah.
great job on Brunson. I've seen him on Giannis, and he does like a pretty good job despite giving up so much size. I don't recall who Indiana had guarding Tatum in, say, their in-season tournament
Oh,
run.
right. I mean, not that they're going to rely on him a ton on offense, but he's been playing well lately, so we'll see if that carries over to this series. Otherwise, like, I don't know, like, X Factors, is like Nemhard going to be a source of offense for them?
Well, it
Yeah.
depends on how the Celtics are guarding them, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
there have been certain games throughout even the playoffs where Nemart has shown that if he's the one that's going to have the advantageous matchup, Indiana will keep going to him. So it's going to be interesting to see how aggressive he actually is. I think, frankly, I don't think that Drew should be put on any of Indiana's guards because he's going to get cooked. But he might actually spend a lot of time guarding Siakam for that reason. We'll see. Both teams are like so weird with their like 5-out alignment. They just
Yeah.
like we're probably going to see a lot of cross matches because both like to, well, especially Indiana likes to play a lot in transition too. So that'll be interesting as well. I don't think that they're like a great matchup attacking team. They're not like great at attacking cross matches either, but they generate so many that you imagine that there will be opportunities for that there, whether it's like Siakam attacking smalls or Halliburton attacking like the slower, like bigger players on the Celtics, just because he is so shifty. And we saw that from him. He basically cooked everybody on the Celtics in the in-season tournament. So that'll be interesting as well. I basically think that nobody but Derek White should ever be on Halliburton because I think that if Halliburton is aggressive enough, he can score on any other Celtic. But
Hmm.
except maybe Tatum. Eh.
That's going to be, yeah,
But
hit or miss, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. I'd say for the Pacers, yeah, that's my X Factor, Neesmith. But for the Celtics, I guess, I mean, they're going to focus on Tatum, probably have the best defenders they got on him. So that's going to leave, I guess it's just going to leave Jaylen Brown open to try and do something. Who do you have as the Celtics X Factor?
Oh yeah. I have Jalen as the X factor. And especially because I think they're going to put Neesmith on Tatum. There's no one else on the Pacers that's near strong enough to handle Jalen Brown. For that reason, I'm going to go with him. X factor is supposed to be like an unknown quantity, but I think that he's just going to have a big series, like bigger than
Yeah.
even the first two. And he's been pretty like steady through the first two rounds. Like he's a monster in transition. It's one of the reasons I actually think they should just keep They should probably put Neesmith on Jalen and then kind of
Hope
turn
Tatum
Tatum
shoots
into a scorer against
shoots
Siakam and
himself
sort
out of
of
the series. Not that he'd ever be out of the series, but you know,
Jalen.
no, hope Tatum like shoots enough and
Oh,
misses, and they maybe win some games off
I
that.
just think that he's less effective as a scorer than
Yeah,
as the
yeah.
facilitator for that team as they're configured, right?
We'll see if Pacers ever make an adjustment, like matchup wise on defense, if they switch some coverages. But
He'll
Yeah.
probably mix some things up. I think Rick Carlisle has been very like, yeah, let's just like mix things up throughout. I also think that Miles Turner is going to be the other X factor for the Pacers. If they
Mm.
really want to make this a series, Miles has to be big. And part of that is because whether Kristaps comes back or not, that's the one position where you could potentially see Indiana having a legitimate advantage defensively. So, or offensively against whoever the primary defensive matchup is against the Celtics. So I think Miles is too quick for Al Horford, and he is. I don't see like Kristaps as like a particularly imposing physical defender on other centers, and I think Miles, even though he's not the best, say in the post or on drives, like he kind of reminds me of just bigger Siakam, frankly, in that regard, with like less shooting touch. I think that he has an opportunity to make his impact in that way, scoring wise, like attacking mismatches, especially as Indiana likes to play so much in transition. Like I said, I mentioned Siakam attacking cross matches, but Miles can too, and we saw quite a bit of that actually in the Bucks series, where Miles was trying to take on smaller guys in the post. And I think that because the Celtics are going to be pretty committed to their transition defense against this Pacers team, one, they're probably not going to get as many offensive rebounds, as they probably will be crashing the glass quite as much against the Pacers. I don't think you really should most of the time, because they're going to just like run out on you. They're probably going to be giving up cross matches just because they're trying to get matched up and like get everybody back, just to keep Indiana from getting those easy buckets. So I think Miles could potentially have a pretty big series, whether he's shooting from three or not, but also his 3-point shot is going to be a variable, because I just foresee the Celtics giving up on the pick and pop with Miles Turner, and he could really punish them for that. Just like the Celtics expect every other team to do with Kristaps. So yeah, it's weird. Like both teams really like offensively. Indiana's really the only Eastern team that I could see offensively matching Boston. Whereas defensively, I just think Boston's going to have that edge. They're going to get just a few more stops. Any other team in the East, I think, is easy for Boston to stop. Whereas Indiana's advantages are all on the offensive side. So I think they could give them at least a real series.
All right, well, let's move to Wolves and Mavs. So,
For me, it's all about Luka. Luka versus Jaden in particular. I don't think that any other player on the Wolves really gives Luka any trouble. I do think that it was evident from last series against OKC that even though the Mavs are not a high turnover team, if you apply enough pressure, you can force turnovers on them, and you can force turnovers on Luka, who's usually pretty good at taking care of the ball. So that's going to be part of the story, as well as not just Jaden on Luka, but like the help and how often they're sort of picking his pockets and that kind of thing. But I say Jaden in particular because I just think he's too strong for any other defender, or you're not ever switching your bigs out onto Luka. Even if it's Rudy, like Luka's salivating at that. Maybe I'm wrong. We're going to probably see some possessions where Luka tries to ISO Rudy anyway, because he's not really big on going for the advantageous matchups. He just likes to take on the toughest ones, and we'll see how that works out. But the last time I saw Luka play Jaden, it was clear that Jaden's length was bothering Luka quite a bit, but he's got the strength advantage there. So there's just going to be a lot of like back and forth that goes on. I think he'll have an easier time in this series than he did against OKC, just because no one is like Lou Dort, as much of a tank as Lou Dort is. And so Luka's probably going to have an easier time driving and just getting to his spots, but it's going to be about like contesting those shots, playing the passing lanes to mess up his passes, force turnovers, and that kind of thing. What about you? What do you think is a key matchup
I mean, I
here?
think obviously that's a key matchup, so I agree with you for sure. I'm also interested in like obviously Kyrie and whoever's guarding him. So
Mhm.
I'm always interested with how Ant and McDaniels like switch up who they're on, because that was like the biggest kind of issue for the Nuggets that we couldn't get over. In addition to Cat just being a good like one-on-one defender and Rudy as the roamer, the whole like equation
Mhm.
is a it's just like the Mavs offense versus the Wolves defense is the matchup I'm interested in. But also just Ant versus however they're going to try to guard him. So Ant could
That's
just
a
like
good point.
he could
Who do
just
you
go
think
off.
they're gonna?
Who is going to be on Ant?
I think Derek Jones Jr. isn't strong enough.
I don't think they have any answer for Ant. I think it's just a matter of like I think they're probably going to try to like trap him and stuff, and they're going to go with the same thing where he's just going to pass out of it and Conley's going to be operating. I don't know, or they're just going to we're just going to mix up who's on him one on one, and he might score every time, and they'll try and keep pace on the offensive end. I don't know. What else can
I
they
do
really
think
do?
that so we actually put out a poll the other day on who Dallas was rooting for between the Nuggets and the Wolves, and it was very close. I didn't know which answer would come out on top because I think it's pretty clear that like one team is easier for Dallas to score against, that's the Nuggets, and one team is easier for Dallas to stop on defense, and that's the Wolves. And I wonder if just the fact, even though they don't really have a great perimeter defender for Ant, just the fact of Lively's presence at the rim just ends up making a bigger
Hmm.
difference on Ant,
Yeah.
just because if nothing else, you can stop those easy points that he gets on drives and kind of force him into the mid range more, which he can score there, but you're just kind of playing the math game more so than the Nuggets were able to stop him without having to trap him sort of constantly, right?
But the Wolves are a good 3-point shooting team, so if they're like,
So
yeah,
was
like,
OKC.
yeah, it's true. The Wolves offense can do some turnovers. Obviously, their offense looked like really good against us. It was so annoying, but like even in the that Thunder in the game 6, Chet had some turnovers at the end of the game. Kayson Wallace had some turnovers. It's like if they can do that to the Wolves too, and just like kind of make them get
Yeah.
sloppy, like they're not the greatest offensive half court team ever, so yeah, they're going to get some corner three opportunities for Conley and McDaniels and Nah, and they're either going to hit them or they're not. And then the Mavs are obviously going to get in transition again, just like any team would against the Wolves. And so yeah, we'll see. Let's make our predictions though.
So I'm going to go with the Timberwolves here. I think they're the better team. I do think that Dallas has the best player, but we have the best player too, and it didn't matter. And also, I don't think that I don't know what kind of Luka we're going to get. We got like a couple good games from him against the Thunder, but he's been very hit or miss with more misses in the playoffs ever since he hurt his knee. And they're going to need great Luka, I think, to beat this Bulls defense. So, and I think Minnesota just needs to play like decent defense and then get some contributions, kind of like some contributions up and down the roster. I don't even think Ant has to be like supernova against this Dallas team because they've struggled offensively, even against the Clippers in round one. Part of it was good defense from the Clippers, but a lot of it was like Luka and Kyrie both being off. I do think, despite Minnesota being a better defensive team, I think Kyrie's probably going to have an easier series because OKC seem to have like targeted him as like we are not going to let this guy go off. There was a lot of pressure on him in any ISO situation that wasn't involving, say, Case and Wallace, who I think did the best one-on-one job on Kyrie, where they were just like, we got to force the ball out of his hands. And the Wolves, we saw they can do so many creative things defensively to just force you into exclusively tough buckets, basically. And look, Luka and Kyrie are both like great tough bucket getters, but so were the Suns supposedly, and they got schmacked. So
Hmm.
while I don't think this will be a sweep wouldn't shock me. I don't think it's going to be a sweep, but I think that the Wolves should look like the better team in basically every game they play.
Yeah, I would pick the Wolves probably in like 6 or something. I am interested to see though how the Mavs play against them with two like offensive creators, like on-ball creators, because that's
Mm-hmm.
like what the Nuggets fans were wishing for a lot of the time. Where it's like, well, Jamal, like we can't throw to MBJ when he's struggling because he can't create against this defense. So I want to see how that looks. I also want to see the Wolves and how they guard the 3-point line, just because they were giving it up to the Nuggets and not like closing out as
They sure
hard.
were. A lot of the threes in the, say, against the Thunder were coming from their role players who are not great 3-point shooters, but turned
Mm.
into great 3-point shooters, at
Yeah,
least for that series. I think PJ Washington's just been a flamethrower since the playoffs
yeah.
started.
I know he had some good shots. Yeah, I want to see how they defend the three. I think there was like this misconception that like, oh, the Wolves, the shot that they always give up is the mid range. It's like the Wolves will give up whatever shot they want to give up, like against whatever they perceive your weakness is. So
Yeah.
I
They've
want
been
to
a
see
lot more
them.
versatile than anyone thought they would be defensively. Thanks to all of the Rudy haters that awakened a fire in him after game 5, okay?
Hmm.
Because he really was on I think he was really excellent defensively in game 6. I think he was pretty good in game 7 as well, but it was really more about everybody else. I thought Rudy was like pretty helpful to the Wolves on offense, especially in the second half. Um,
I also want to see how the Wolves look early in the series, just because obviously they were super hungry against the Nuggets, who eliminated them last year. So it's like there was a sense of like whatever revenge or whatever the hell that they put into their mind to stay motivated and create that sense of urgency. Are they going to have the same thing against the Mavs, where they haven't played each other in the playoffs? Ant's probably going to be hyped up by like trying to outplay Luca, of course, because like that's just how Ant is. The series for the Wolves was much tougher against the Nuggets than I would say the Mavs. Obviously, they closed it out in 6, so just by that, the Mavs had an easier series. Not that the Thunder are easy, they present their own challenges, but I would love to see the Wolves kind of like drop a game early because they were like, oh, the Nuggets series was so hard, and they're like struggling from that. Just for my Nuggets ego.
well, you're going to be at home in game 1, which is going to help for sure. I mean, coming back from altitude, coming back from 7 games, but they did get a couple of days off, and that series kicks off tomorrow. The Celtics Pacers series kicks off in just a couple of hours today as we record on Tuesday afternoon. The last thing I wanted to say on the Wolves-Mavs series is just I think Cat is going to be a really big X factor for Minnesota in these games. Like the difference really between it being a short series and a longer series, because I think that the Wolves really win either way. But Dallas doesn't have a matchup for Cat, especially with Maxi Kleba injured with his, I believe he tore his labrum in his shoulder, and so Cat's just going to have an advantageous matchup every time down, and Dallas is going to be forced to double and rotate out of everything. I think whether he is playing the 5 in those backup minutes or he's playing the 4 in those starter minutes, because PJ Washington is not guarding Cat. Like we saw AG have some struggle with him, although I think AG did a better job on Cat this year than he did last year. But it'll really be about like, hey, does Cat still have it in the tank, after 2 rounds,
Hmm.
after a long series against the Nuggets? And can he still be efficient? I think he's just kind of always their X factor. And he was a really big part of why they won game 7. Because, like I said, Ant was struggling offensively um, as a scorer, but Cat was really like aggressive and like aggressively like getting to the rim. He was posting up a lot, passing out of doubles, etc., and in the whole latter half of that series. And I think if he can keep that up and keep playing smart, not commit dumb fouls, all of that stuff, stay on the floor, he could be a really big help to them. And then for Dallas, it's going to be PJ Washington. He just does so many great things on the floor. He's a great perimeter defender. I don't know who they're going to put him on. So I don't know that he's like the best on Ant. But when you think about the fact that the Nuggets had some success with AG on Ant, and then you just kind of like let Cat feast behind that because there really isn't anyone big enough to deal with him. Maybe PJ ends up being like the best defensive matchup on Ant, and we'll see what Dallas does throughout that series. But also, his 3-point shot basically saved the Mavs through 2 series when their offense was like really sputtering with Luca and Kyrie not, shooting well from anywhere on the floor, basically until the end of the OKC series. And like you said, the Wolves are probably going to end up leaving him open, leaving Derek Jones Jr. open, but PJ is going to spend a lot of time on the floor, and so he could be a big X factor for them on both ends.
Yeah, I'd go PJ or like Derek Jones Jr. just because they could hit those threes where like, yeah, like the Nuggets, where it's like if there's those role players hit the corner threes or just hit the threes that they just get. Even if it's like contested or something, you never know. Like if they can just make some of those shots, it's gonna be a lifesaver. You have to do so much more than just hit threes against the Wolves, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. And then for the Wolves, yeah, Cat seems like he's like their main source of offense outside of Ant. He's like their best 3-point shooter. He was doing pretty good driving and like getting some like floaters off the glass. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that in this series. He's not been like the most amazing
Right. Like I
post
said, they
player.
have more rim presence than the Nuggets had.
Yeah, so it's like if he's trying to take dudes one on one, are they going to be able to get some turnovers on him? Where like KCP did that a couple times on him. Like if they can do that and get turnovers on him and limit him a bit, they'll have a much better chance. But we'll see. We'll see how big Cat is in
Yeah.
the series. But I'm definitely picking the Wolves. And then we'll be back in another episode to pick and preview the finals, of course, when that comes around. So we're not going to pick
Yeah,
that
definitely.
right now. But I expect a Celtics Wolves finals, and then Grace and I will debate about what team we're rooting for. I guess I'll see
Maybe
how
we'll
this.
debate. Maybe I will have converted Will by that point.
I know I keep going back and forth. I'm
All I
rooting
need
for
you
the
to do is
Mavs.
watch Tatum against the Pacers, and then you'll understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for Pacers and Mavs,
Okay.
but I
That
don't
would
think
be such a wild finals. Like, I would just laugh if that happened.
so would I. But
Just
I
laugh
don't
the
think
whole
either
show.
is going to happen. But that's the teams that I will be rooting for. And then if it gets to Wolves Celtics, we'll see how I feel. I'm like so torn. I dislike both teams pretty equally. So yeah.
See, that's
Um,
like that's almost a statement more on the Celtics because they haven't even given you a good reason and you already hate them as much as you hate the Wolves who just defeated the Nuggets.
It is. It is quite a statement. I don't know. There's just something about them and like the whole super team thing and Tatum and Jay. I
Oh yeah, your
love
whole
like
Brad Stevens thing.
I do love when they choke in the playoffs. It's just like so funny, except for when they choke to the Warriors because I really wanted them to win that finals and they let me down. So maybe that's why I hate them still. Really disappointed me letting the Warriors get another one that they shouldn't have.
Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. They did give you a good because you hate the Warriors so much that the Celtics disappointed you.
And I'm like, I already rooted for the Celtics in one final, so it's like, could I do it again? I don't know. We'll see.
Look, I've got a lot of massholes in my life that I can't like I can't stand if they get this one. You know
Gotcha.
that, right? The people from
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts, they call themselves
Yep.
massholes.
The
All right, just
Massholes.
making sure.
I was debating for a second what that meant, but yeah.
No, it's exactly what you thought. And you guys know who you are. So, um, yeah, but we'll definitely be continuing to cover the conference finals. The Nuggets ending their season did not take away my love for basketball, although it's tough. But this was good. I think it was good to sort of go through everything and debrief and start to look forward to the basketball that's continuing, as well as previewing some of the off-season conversations that we'll have after the playoffs. So this has been What's in a Game. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and leave us a review. Do all of the YouTube things. We're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music, not Apple Music yet. We're still working on it. And just remember, winning is fun and losing sucks big time.